Hi, welcome to School Zoned, a podcast of the Oklahoma Public School Resource Center. And I would like to welcome Nikhil Kawlra to the show. Welcome, Nikhil.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Definitely. So Nikhil has some interesting pieces, and we're going to cover all this. I'll give you a quick preview. Nikhil's the school leader for Collegiate Hall Academy. Also, is the co-founder of the Teaching and Leading Initiative of Oklahoma, TLI, Oklahoma.org, correct?
That's right.
There we go. And then, but I want to start off with, I think, a really important piece. So longtime listeners of the show will know that, you know, yours truly is a proud Michigan State Spartan alum. I bleed green. And, so I'd like to, show the users that I'm willing to reach across aisles. I'm willing to build coalitions because sitting across from me is a Michigan Wolverine.
Yeah, I think what Brent's trying to say is that it's helpful to interview someone smarter than you.
Yeah, there you go.
Just kidding.
Fortunate for me, everyone I interview is smarter than me. So there we go. Yeah. But yeah, and we are pre-recording this broadcast, but it's right before the Big Ten tournament, and hopefully on Sunday we get a chance for our for a rematch, a second rematch of the year. Remind me, how have the first two basketball games gone this year?
I have a separate question. What's the difference between pre-recording and recording? Isn't everything just recorded?
Well, but so we're not just so usually we recording. We yeah, there you go. See, this is why people don't like people from the University of Michigan.
Deflect.
There we go. So, anyways, maybe we'll have to do a little teaser when this broadcast, and we'll say how the Big Ten tournament turned out.
That sounds awesome.
We don't know, but I'm sure that, there are Oklahomans sitting there going, "Why the heck am I hearing about a Big Ten rivalry?" So maybe let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
So before we get to Collegiate Hall, Nikhil, why don't you tell us about yourself? Who is Nikhil Kawlra?
So Nikhil Kawlra is a little Indian boy that grew up just north of Detroit in a little town called Troy. Yep. Went to the University of Michigan, as you have already mentioned, and studied neuroscience. I was on my way to becoming a doctor like I was supposed to, and then joined Teach for America and was fortunate to be placed at a charter school, an all-boys charter high school that was founding in West Philadelphia. And so I actually got to help found the school. I was a founding teacher there and spent my 2 years both teaching and building a cross-country team at the time, and then getting a master's at Penn in urban education. And then left actually after my 2 years in the classroom and said, well, that was a great experience. I'm off to med school, and went to Georgetown to do a master's. And found myself very quickly missing the classroom. And so came back to education. Along the way, have worked at the Denver School of Science Technology, DSST public schools, have earned a master's in ed leadership from Columbia's Teachers College, and have done the Building Excellent Schools Fellowship.
Cool.
Which brought me to Oklahoma.
And along the way, you also met another, I think she was a principal at the time when you met her, right?
Yeah, my wife.
Yes.
She worked with me in Philadelphia and then had the opportunity to found a DSST school in Denver, which is why we moved there. Did fantastic work. I think it's pretty well known in our household that she's a better educator than I am. She just lets me do the work because she's also a very kind individual.
And then what got you to Tulsa?
So my in-laws they grew up in Tulsa, and my wife grew up in Norman. So she's Sooner born and Sooner bred, went to the University of Oklahoma. And so this was an opportunity to come home. My parents now live my mother and father-in-law now live just outside of Tulsa, and so they get to see their 3 grandkids fairly often.
Cool. That's fun. And so you founded Collegiate Hall.
I did.
What the heck is Collegiate Hall?
Collegiate Hall is a free charter school located in the 61st and Peoria neighborhood of Tulsa. 61st and Peoria is a really interesting neighborhood in Tulsa. It's technically a part of South Tulsa, though in reality sort of lives off on its own. It's about
for those that don't know, because I've learned somewhat of the code, even though I live in Oklahoma City, South Tulsa is generally the references to a more affluent area, right, of Tulsa.
That's right. So if you go 2 miles north of where our school is located, you're in Brookside, which is one of the nicest neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. 2 miles east is Southern Hills Country Club, which is one of the nicest country clubs in the state of Oklahoma. And then 2 miles south is Jenks, which is a pretty well-known and fairly affluent suburb of Tulsa. And right in the middle is this ring of about 4 square miles, depending on who you ask, between 2.5 and 4 square miles. That is a highly concentrated area of poverty. So there's, I think, 42 low-income housing apartment complexes in that area. And we are smack dab in the middle.
Okay.
So we currently educate students generally from that neighborhood, but we actually pull from 42 different elementary schools in Tulsa and serve a student body that's about 90% economically disadvantaged. And have a college prep and STEM mission. So our kids are trying to make some rapid growth to get on the college prep track and also do some really interesting STEM work like coding and engineering.
Cool. So grade level served right now and number of students?
Currently serve grades 4 through 8, about 250 kids, and we'll be expanding in 2020 to start an elementary school. And so eventually we'll be a full pre-K-8 serving 600 kids with the same STEM and college prep theme.
And you have a location in mind for that place? Or
We're looking. You got one?
No. That's a common challenge for charter schools.
Yeah.
It's one that, that keeps me up at night and causes me a lot of headaches. So.
Yeah. Ultimately, we would like to stay in the neighborhood that we're currently in, given the need, but if not, as close to that as possible, so that our families can have that consistency all the way from pre-kindergarten through 8th grade.
Yeah. And right now you're currently co-housed with... I don't want to get the elementary school name.
Marshall Elementary School.
Right.
So we're co-located with a traditional Tulsa public school called Marshall Elementary. They serve grades pre-K through 6. Okay. We have sort of a wing, a hallway in the building, and they have the rest of the building. And so when you walk in, you walk straight ahead, you see Collegiate Hall. You walk to the left, you see Marshall, and you see 2 different schools with 2 different cultures, for better and for worse.
Cool. And do you have some kids from Marshall that then come to Collegiate Hall? Do you have siblings?
Yep. So both are true. We have about depending on the year, between 1/3 and 1/2 of our student body comes directly from the neighborhood around our school, including Marshall, and there are siblings that cross. And our students don't interact a ton during the course of the school day, but students are aware that there are 2 schools in the building,
sure.
And we try really hard to make sure that they have positive views of one another, so it's not a rivalry, but instead sort of a cooperation that we're all here to get something done.
Cool. So you said a public charter school, but I thought charter schools were private schools. He said jokingly.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brent, for that.
You're welcome. That's a common misperception.
It is a common misconception. So we are not a private school. We are a public school. And so that means a couple of things for us. One is that we obviously don't charge tuition or fees. Mm-hmm. We don't take certain kids and reject other kids. We do use a lottery-based system. And actually, to date, Collegiate Hall has accepted everybody that has applied.
But people tell me that you kick them out or reject them all the time. The charter schools do that.
So I'll say a couple of things about that. One is every year we email, or at least the past 3 years, we have emailed every Tulsa public school principal and said, hey, if you have a student that is struggling academically or behaviorally and just needs a fresh environment, maybe with some more structure or longer school day, send them our way. And then once parents get there, we work really hard to try to keep kids in our building. And when parents come and say, I'm not sure about this, we beg and plead, please stay here. So from beginning of year to end of year, we have about a 90% retention rate of students, which we'd like to see be higher, but are fairly proud of.
So when people leave, it's their choice, or you're kicking them out?
Oh, it's their choice. We, by law and also by practice, don't expel students. Most often, the common cause of students leaving is moving. So if they move out of the district,
mobility, right?
Yeah, or across town, and can't physically make it to our school anymore, they will move. I will say we offer 13 different bus stops across town to try to get as many of those kids into the building as possible, but about 8 or 10 kids every year move and just can't make it to school.
Okay. So you mentioned longer class day. What distinguishes Collegiate Hall? Like what are you said you're STEM focused, you're college prep focused. Give me details. What does all that stuff mean?
Yeah. So our average student comes into us performing below the 10th percentile, sometimes as high as the 15th percentile nationally on a nationally normed test
how do you
called
measure
the
that?
NWA map.
Cool.
And it's our job or it's our mission to try to get them to the 66th percentile by the time they leave us. So not only do they have to make the 1 year's worth of growth, but they actually have to catch up to their peers across the country.
Why did you choose 66 percentile?
So NWA MAP sets a benchmark of, depending on the test, 66 to 72nd percentile is considered college ready.
Okay.
And so that is our bar for we have 4 or 5 years, depending on how long we have the kid to make X amount of growth. That typically amounts to about 8 years worth of growth in 5 school years. So
no pressure.
No pressure. So we have to make a year and a half's worth of growth on average with each kid. And so we do things differently in order to try to make that happen. So one of the things, as you mentioned, is we have a longer school day. So kids start at 7:45 and are at school till about 4. And then teachers also offer tutoring at least once a week after school to kids that are struggling. And then the actual what we do during the school day also looks a little bit different. Kids get the core subjects, math, reading, science, and social studies every single day for an hour. But then at our youngest grades, they get a double block of math to try to help with their math fluency. They get a double block of literacy in 5th grade to help improve their reading and writing skills. And then kids every day are getting guided reading from their teachers in small groups to continue to push. And so, for example, before coming here, we were at professional development. 88% of our kids from the end of first trimester to the end of second trimester made at least one measure of growth on the FNP test, which is one of the measures we use to determine reading growth.
What is FNP?
FNP is Fontes and Pinnell. It's a reading assessment that teachers do with students that helps determine fluency, reading comprehension, that sort of thing. And so if our goal is to get more kids, well, we all know that one of the keys to unlocking this is helping kids read better. And so that's something we monitor fairly closely.
Sounds exhausting.
I think our teachers would tell you that it's really hard work.
Yeah.
That is, I don't know how to. I've not yet figured out how to change that part of the equation. If you're asking teachers to plan really rigorous lessons and tutor kids and do guided reading, all things that we know will ultimately impact student achievement, there's no shortcuts to making that happen.
And how do you compensate your teachers for all that work?
So we have traditionally looked at sort of what neighboring districts compensate teachers with, or how they compensate teachers, and then have added a certain percentage above that. And usually, it is not. It's not going to make you. It's not going to make you Bill Gates. But it's
your teachers driving BMWs.
Yeah. It's about $4,000 or so more per year. Which, on an absolute scale is really helpful. Our teachers would be quick to tell you that if you did it by hour, it probably doesn't equate.
Sure.
But I think it's important to recognize that our teachers are going above and beyond in order to make a year and a half's worth of growth happen per kid per school year.
And are you able to retain staff? I mean, how is that? Is that possible, given all the work you're asking them?
Yes and no. So we have done a really good job retaining leaders historically and attracting leaders to our organization. We are, I think, in total transparency, like figuring out how we can make teachers' lives a little bit nicer. So we have created a master teacher task force that is thinking about teacher retention and teacher sustainability and how to reward teachers that are working really hard day in and day out. I'd be lying if I told you I had all the right answers, but I think it's really important that we have that conversation because our teachers they're absolutely killer.
Heroes.
And they're heroes.
I mean, if they're working that hard and getting these kinds of results.
Yep.
We haven't really gotten to the results. Talk about like some of the accomplishments.
Yep. So I'll say this in a couple of ways. So I've mentioned that our minimum bar is a year and a half's worth of growth per school year based on the MAP test in math, reading, and science. And so over the past 3 years, we've had 27 administrations of the test, math, reading, and science for each grade level. We've hit that bar of a year and a half 26 out of 27 times.
You missed one.
We missed it once. Yep. But then we have to play catch up.
Sure.
If our goal is really to get kids college ready, then we've got to make sure that we hit those marks. And so what that has meant is our founding class that came in on average around the 10th percentile, as I mentioned, is now in the upwards of the 75th percentile in math, the 85th percentile in reading, and the 95th percentile in science. So they have gone from sort of the bottom of the race to the front of the race in 4 years. And
so blowing out the goal of 66 percentile.
Yeah. On average, blowing out the goal. I think we have 2 kids in our founding class that are still below that, but everybody else is on track. And that's borne out in a couple different ways. Like we've seen parents we do an annual parent survey. We've averaged about 94% parent satisfaction across all metrics. We've done the tripod survey in the past, which is a student culture survey. We've had the best scores in Tulsa. We really think that actually it's our school culture that leads and then our academics that follow.
That's cool. You and I have had this conversation. Do you think it's fair to say what you're doing isn't rocket science? It's a lot of planning and more hard work.
Yeah, it is not rocket science. It is hiring really dedicated individuals that are, you said our teachers are heroes. I think that's an understatement.
Yeah.
They have committed themselves to doing this work because it really does change the trajectory of our kids' lives. You can imagine a kid going to high school in the 2nd percentile, what his chances of graduating or her chances of graduating would be, and then the same kid going to high school in the 85th percentile and what the chances of him or her graduating would be. That said, there are some key ingredients. The PISA study will tell you that a orderly and disciplined school results in higher achievement. Study after study will show you the better planned teachers are, the quality of the materials you put in front of kids, the more likely kids are to find success in that classroom. Coaching, and especially practice-based coaching of teachers, is critical to our success. And so we've tried to look at what are those best practices and implement them as best we can. And I think every year try to pick one more thing off that we can do a little bit better in order to make our school a better place for both teachers and kids.
Cool. Going back to one of the other myths, and I'm going to throw maybe a little bit of a curveball at you.
Sweet.
So you know my daughter, Maddie.
Yeah.
She's Downs.
Yeah.
She has a spunky personality. She gets that from her mom because, I'm cool, calm, and collected all the time. What would you do if we enrolled her there? One, could we enroll her there?
Yes, you can enroll her there. And
but you allow kids with special needs.
Of
you
course.
Don't just push them out.
Of course. Anywhere between 15 and 20% of our student body has special needs. I think this year it's right about 15%. We would enroll her. We take it as our responsibility to make sure every child grows, regardless of what their home circumstances, what their needs may be. Our goal is that 100% of kids meet their growth goals every year. We typically hover around 70% of kids meeting their growth goals for the year, which we'd like to see be higher. There are things that we, I think, are actively wrestling with as an organization to try to make our school a better place. And some of that is identifying how we better support students' individual needs. So, for example, we're revisiting our RTI process this year, or we're adding social-emotional learning next year.
An RTI for
response to intervention.
Yep.
We're trying to increase the number of special educators we have in the building in order to help meet the needs of someone like Maddie, who we think is absolutely capable and we need to figure out how to help her achieve at the levels we know she can.
Yeah, and I don't like putting limits on it. I'm not sure that she's ever going to get to the 66th percentile. Right?
Fair enough.
But I also, was raised in a family that had a fairly simple philosophy, which was, size 12 and kid's backside, metaphorically speaking, it never hurt anybody.
Yeah.
Right? So now we call that growth mindset, I think. But my family just believed in, it's hard work, get going now.
Yeah.
And that's how we've kind of that's kind of how we approach parenting.
Yeah.
And I think that's how Collegiate all seems to approach kids learning.
Yeah, and I think we've had students that have come to us that are intellectually delayed or emotionally disturbed, and we will still aspire for them to hit the 66th percentile. I understand what you're saying, that
Sure.
perhaps it's not reasonable. But what I've found is that the minute we start saying some of you won't get there, kids start putting themselves in that bucket.
Yep. It's just like you mentioned cross country.
Yeah.
As soon as, we'd run as a group, and as soon as one guy dropped, all of a sudden 3 or 4 guys can't keep up with the big group.
Yep.
Right?
And so our vernacular is always, hey, everybody is going to make it there. And are some kids not ultimately going to go to college? Probably. Will they pick a trade school or pick a career right out of high school? Sure. But that's not my decision to make for them. My responsibility is to work as hard for them as I possibly can to help them achieve the highest the highest achievement that they can, which to us is, if you're prepared for a 4-year college, you're likely prepared for some of the other avenues in life.
Amen. Let me ask you one other charter school specific question. I read in an article today that I didn't agree with, that the charter schools skim money from the existing school system. How do you respond to that one?
So I think that's a really interesting question, and I think about it in a couple different ways. One is, on average, I think nationally charter schools get about 72 cents on the dollar relative to their local district. That's certainly true for Collegiate Hall relative to Tulsa public schools. And part of that is because, we don't qualify for bond money or ad valorem money. And actually, as a charter, we pay 5% of our state aid directly back to Tulsa public schools.
Before it even comes to you.
Before it even comes to me, just for the ability to exist. And so some of that 5% is meant to offset any decrease in economies of scale that the district might have. Looked at another way, like the bond money is coming for technology and textbooks and buildings no matter what, and if there are fewer students in a district, that same money is spread over more kids.
Students, yeah.
So you could look at it that way. But I think ultimately the way I look at it is our hope is to always be a good partner with our district, with Tulsa Public Schools.
Yep.
And we're fortunate that TPS has a mindset of a portfolio, which is ultimately there are schools in the district and charter schools that parents who want something different than the neighborhood school are able to opt into. And so I don't know that I would, I reject the premise of the question a little bit in that it sets up charters and districts as oppositional forces, when actually, if you think about it differently, they could be sort of co-conspirators to provide parents more options with a variety of different flavors for whatever their children might need.
Cool. And you mentioned, Tulsa sponsors you, you're authorized.
That's right.
Do you try and partner with the district? Have you had success? Do you have other areas where you'd like to partner?
Yeah, I would say that we're really fortunate in Tulsa that the 6 of us that partner or that are authorized by the district do have the ability to have really honest conversations with our counterparts in the district. So we have monthly meetings, for example, to share best practices and share our experiences, those sorts of things. It's never perfect. But if we put aside our differences and say, hey, actually, all the kids in Tulsa are Tulsa kids, let's get as many high quality seats as possible in our city for our students, some of those inherent tensions start to fall away. And so that leads actually to why we created the Teaching and Leading Initiative, is that we looked around after 3 years of being a charter school and have had some good success and said, charter schools are supposed to be labs of innovation, and theoretically you're supposed to spread best practices. That was the whole idea.
That's the theory.
So we're 3 years in, and we've seen that our kids are growing leaps and bounds, and a vast majority of our teachers are novice teachers. Perhaps they're in their first 2 years of teaching. I know technically
So
the definition is first 5 years, but for us it's first 2 years.
So yeah, almost all of your teachers in the first 2 years. So you're
Yep.
getting all those results with
First and second year teachers.
youngins, with young teachers. Yeah.
And so we looked around and said, what can we offer back to our city? And so we created the Teaching and Leading Initiative, which provides low-cost, best practice-based professional development to local districts to help with novice teacher work. So we know we have a huge emergency certification crisis in Oklahoma, almost 3,000 emergency certified teachers this year alone. And more often than not, they're getting placed into classrooms with limited skills and limited support. And so we said, hey, at Collegiate Hall, we're seeing our first year teachers with this certain subset of support be really successful. What if we provided that support to other districts? And so this year we are partnered with Broken Arrow Public Schools, and specifically at Sequoia Middle School and at Cleveland Public Schools to provide free or low-cost professional development to their novice teachers, a subset of their novice teachers at least. And we have started to see some of those teachers really blossom. So there's a teacher in Cleveland that she's a first-year teacher. At the beginning of the year, 26% of her kids were on grade level. And in the middle of the year, 78% of her kids were on grade level.
That's fantastic.
And again, first-year teacher.
They're using the MAP assessment as well?
Yeah, I think they use STAR. They use whatever their local assessment is, but that outpaces sort of historically what they've seen. So if we could do that more, provide more high quality professional development and coaching to local area teachers as they enter the profession, we should see improvements in student achievement. We should see improvements in their TLE scores. We should see improvements in their own self-efficacy. And hopefully we should see improvements in teacher retention. And so TLI gets to provide sort of non-evaluative coaching right alongside the district to help teachers improve at those critical early years of their career.
Cool. And plan for next year, so you're with Cleveland and Broken Arrow this year?
Yep.
You're going to try and expand that? Or?
Yeah, so we're looking for at least 1 or 2 more districts to work with in the upcoming year. Could be in Tulsa, could be around Oklahoma City, could be somewhere entirely different. Really, we're looking for districts that have a need with a fair number of novice or emergency certified teachers and a desire to see those teachers get additional support. And so the way that we've designed our PD is that it's a 3 to 5 year plan where in year 1, like in Broken Arrow in Cleveland this year, we'll do a lot of the novice teacher coaching. But by the end of year 3 or year 5, we should be handing that back off to the district. And so we're simultaneously helping the district build their own novice teacher development program while sort of using ours as a model.
So teach a man to fish.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what we heard from districts as we started to work with them is, it's really nice that you're providing me a novice teacher, but you can't do this in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. You can't coach all of my novice teachers at perpetuity at scale. Yeah, there's, don't even know how many districts there are in the state of Oklahoma, but it would be impossible.
514 plus charter schools.
Yeah, it would be impossible for us to reach all of them and all the novice teachers, but we can start working with a district here and help them build their novice teacher strategy, and then go to a different district and help build a novice teacher strategy. And I should say, we're not the end all be all, but we do believe that, if we can provide some thought partnership and some expertise based on what we've learned, teachers and therefore kids are going to be better for it.
That's exciting. So, I don't have a big enough brain to think abstractly. I have to personalize it. So I worked my tail off as a teacher, especially my first year.
Yeah.
Wasn't particularly effective. You can insert a Spartan joke if you'd like.
No, I was a terrible first-year teacher.
So how do you support a first-year teacher? How do you make a first-year teacher an effective teacher?
Yeah, so we've got for ourselves at Collegiate Hall sort of a scope and sequence that we go through for our first-year teachers. Then there are 5 key priorities from whether it's classroom management or student engagement to what students are actually working on to the quality of planning that teachers are doing. And we've basically created a trajectory that at the beginning of the year, teachers need to be able to plan effectively, build clear, consistent routines and procedures in their classrooms, set clear expectations, give clear directions. And then as they master those, infuse joy, increase participation, increase student engagement. And over the course of, for us, 2 years, you should really see teachers master a whole bunch of technical skills that allow them to lead a classroom beautifully. And so what we have seen to date is that when teachers have bought in and said, yeah, I'm super eager for coaching, they have grown really quickly. And so that's how you get first-year teachers that are producing 1.6, 1.7. We had a first-year teacher produce 2.4 years growth in science last year because she just she was hungry for those skills and implemented them with such fidelity that after a year we're looking around going like, she's one of the best teachers I've ever seen.
Wow. That's fantastic. And you're able, so you can do that at Collegiate Hall. I mean, you kind of control everything, right?
Yeah.
Are you able to get similar results when you're working with districts?
Yeah, so I think I referenced a teacher earlier at Cleveland that we have seen that with, or that she's certainly not the only example. One of the beauties of being an outside organization is that we can really just be partners with teachers, right? There's no fear that this is my principal and they're evaluating me and what are they going to think? How does it going to impact my TLE score? How is it going to impact my employment? By being an outside entity, we can really build some trust with teachers and then build that.
It's kind of nice not being the boss.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
and then go through that same trajectory and say, hey, we know no matter what context you're in, teachers need to plan effectively. They need to set clear expectations in their classroom. They got to have clear routines and procedures. That's not a charter thing, right?
Yeah.
That's a teaching thing.
Yes, yeah.
So let's focus on those things that are universally experienced by teachers. And then it doesn't matter if they're in Broken Arrow, Cleveland, Tulsa, Collegiate Hall, you fill in the blank. Let's just build those technical skills to help teachers be successful in their classrooms.
And if you've been able to get, I mean, clearly you're working in 2 school districts, so they weren't forced to work with you.
Yeah.
Do you run into that works in a charter school, not here in a traditional school, or, do you have that divide, or is it?
We haven't experienced a ton of it. There are certainly things that we can do differently than districts can, right? Like we choose to do differently because of the flexibility of our charter.
Yeah.
How we do teacher coaching is a great example. How we build school culture is another example. There are a lot of things that we have some more flexibility on.
Is it you have the flexibility? I mean, so I'm thinking about what is the charter. Like, what's the charter law allow you to do that a traditional district didn't do? Or is it more of a mindset?
I think it's a bit of both. Okay. For us, we were fortunate that because we were I founded the school, we got to build everything from scratch.
Yep.
And so there are some things like, our teachers don't have to be certified, though most all of our teachers are. But there's also a mindset that we can build the culture of our organization from scratch, that sometimes when you're working in an organization that has 2,000, 3,000 employees, it can be hard to steer the ship into a new direction. And so I think there's a bit of both there. But the answer is it is our basic expectation that teachers will be observed weekly and get feedback weekly. It's our basic expectation that they'll turn in pretty robust lesson plans on a weekly basis ahead of time so we can review it and give them feedback and work with them to make lessons better so that every piece of paper that goes in front of a student is high quality.
And do you give them planning time to do those lesson plans, or is that?
Yep. So our middle school 7th and 8th grade teachers get about hour and 50 minutes of prep a day. Okay. And then our lower school teachers get about an hour of prep. So our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade teachers get about an hour of prep a day. I'll tell you, every teacher will tell you that's never enough.
Yep.
But those are the confines that we play in. That's the sandbox we play in.
Yeah, so I'm sure your teachers are working extra hours and doing all the things that
for sure, especially in their first and second year, right? If in your the average first year teacher produces half a year's worth of growth, and we're saying, hey, you got to produce 1.5 years worth of growth, that doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
Right. Now that should come down over time as you become a 3rd, 4th, 5th year teacher. You don't have to spend the same number of hours lesson planning as you did in year 1. Yeah. You don't have to spend the same hours recreating the wheel as you did in year 1. But there's no shortcut to brute force when kids are behind, and we've got to get them caught up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's just hard work, right?
It's not rocket science, as you said.
Yeah, it comes back to that refrain over and over. Oh man. So where do you go from here? Do you try and recreate? And if you're thinking about that, what are the challenges?
So we're trying, and that will open in August 2020 with pre-K and K, and then we will slowly grow all the way to be a pre-K 8
Kinda
school. I don't think we'll ever, at this point, I don't think we'll ever get much bigger than that. I never want to say never, but I don't think we'll get much bigger than that. Every year at our school, we've tried to pick off one objective that we will do better the following year. So in year one, when we were founding, it was all about setting the right culture with our kids. So we worked really hard at that. In year two, we realized we weren't providing teachers as much support in either planning or delivering lessons. So we tried to get better at that. This year, as I mentioned, we're thinking about our RTI process, for example. So we're trying to get better at that. Next year, it's social emotional learning. And so we're really excited to be a part of a cohort of schools across the country that is working with a network of schools in Nashville called Valor Collegiate, who we consider to be at the forefront of social emotional learning nationally.
Let's talk about that, because you and I got a chance to tour that school.
Yeah. Tour of the school means we spent about an hour there, and you didn't see any classrooms.
I didn't see it, but yeah, so I was still floored.
Yeah.
I was still blown away.
Yeah.
So talk about it, but I will jump in here and tell my side of the story too, because
So
I was.
it is one of the most incredible schools I've visited because of the way that they have thought about building community and helping students build their social and emotional. Build themselves up socially and emotionally. And so as we thought about what we would want in an ideal SEL curriculum, we thought about 5 or 6 different things. We thought about mindfulness. We thought about understanding and working through your own emotions. We thought about, sort of being reflective on sort of your past experiences. We've thought about conflict resolution and appreciating people. We've thought about understanding your place in a community. So there's all these pieces of social emotional learning.
And I got to say, like, all of those things that you said, I want in my life.
Right.
Like, I mean, I want for my staff. I want for my family. I mean, like, these are, and I want for our society, because like, imagine if we could work on mindfulness in our society and managing our emotions. I mean, just imagine if our president did that. So, sorry, I had to be partisan for a second. But I mean, think about that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about the happiness that would generate. Now, I will say this: when I first heard about a middle school doing that, I thought back to my middle school years, and I thought, I mean, I know you see this, this fully mature human here, and you think, he couldn't have been that awkward in middle school. And I just feel the pain when I think about 7th and 8th grade. The hormones that are going through my body, and the idea of talking about feelings and about emotions. It just struck me as a completely foreign concept.
Yeah.
And then we went to Valor.
Yep. And so they have developed what they call circles and what they call badge work, which is students as a group going through mindfulness and understanding and working through emotions and conflict resolution in some ways and appreciations. And they have developed badge work, which is kids individually reflecting and growing personally in their character and their social emotional health. And we saw this and we're like, we've got to do this. You referenced your middle school experience. I think part of the way that Collegiate Hall operates right now is because of my middle school experience, which
I'm sure as a little Indian kid in Troy, you were totally the cool hip guy,
it was
right?
totally cool. I had a little mustache. Got made fun of a ton. I remember the 2 kids that had lockers right next to me, and they were not very kind.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I necessarily felt that there were people that had my back.
Yep.
And so right now, as Collegiate Hall currently stands, we're a fairly strict school, right? So we don't. If a child laughs at another student, we will ask them to apologize. If you put your hands on another child, we will call home. We try to make those boundaries really clear for kids because we don't want any kid to feel unsafe. Right? Maslow's hierarchy will tell you 101, like you don't feel safe, you're not going to learn. kids get that pretty quickly, and then we are then able to build a school culture on top of that where kids can be goofy and have fun and smile because they don't ever fear that another child will come at them in any way.
Yeah, attack.
But to take that to the next level, you not only have to help them feel safe, but then you also have to help them grow. And so we have done a good job, I think, at Collegiate Hall so far of helping them grow academically. And we've done some character development in terms of our core values at Collegiate Hall that we espouse to kids of respect and responsibility and courage and compassion and integrity. But we have not done enough in terms of, hey, if you get frustrated, how do you handle that? Hey, if you are having a conflict with another peer, how do you handle that? Hey, if somebody did something nice for you, how do you show them appreciation that's not super awkward because you're in middle school?
Or you're humans, right? I mean, it's still awkward for me and stuff.
Or if you're having trouble focusing, how do you help build your mindfulness, right? And so that's why we ultimately went in search of this. And like I said, Valor to us is sort of the model that we are chasing. And so we're fortunate to be one of 11 networks across the country or schools across the country that are going to be a part of their cohort this year, that we will get to learn how to do circles, and we will get to learn how to implement strong social emotional learning at our school, which we think will really help kids.
So I want to talk about what I saw there. Right?
Yeah,
you mentioned one. They've got the badge work, meaning they essentially have a character-based curriculum that kids work through, and rather than earning grades, they're earning badges, right? And I don't have a full appreciation for that. It's up on their website. It is extraordinary in that I remember one of the badges was you needed to research a position on a political issue. And I think the example they gave was abortion, right? Because, non-controversial issue, right?
Non-controversial. Why would it be? Why would you pick a controversial one?
And you needed to take your opinion and articulate your stance. And then the next step was you had to seek out another student at school that held a different opinion. And then you had to document their opinion. And then, so it was learning how to disagree in a way without demonizing the other side, right? Without, I was just like, wow.
So I'll give you the...
You imagine a middle school doing that, man.
What sold me was actually a group of 7th grade boys, and they were... similar but less controversial. You had to pick something that was important to you and then find someone who disagreed with you. And then you had to find common values. And I heard some 7th grade boys, one of them said, I really enjoy video games. And he had found a classmate that did not like video games. And they had to sit down and they had to talk about it. And so the common value that they had resolved is the boy who liked video games liked to play with his friends. It was a way for him to build friendship. And the other boy had realized that video games were for him a little bit lonely and that he didn't get to see his friends who were out playing outside. And so he valued friendship because he wanted to be outside with his friends. And so their common value was friendship, and it manifested itself in 2 very different ways. And now you've got 2 boys that are very different in what they prefer, but that can share a conversation about their commonality, which is ultimately what community is all about.
Yeah. So there's we're just scratching the surface of the curriculum. But then what we get to witness there was we went into, and in middle school, they've moved this into high school as well, which we didn't see. But in middle school, they've developed this circle work where kids are in a circle, as you would imagine, and they separate out by gender. And we went into 2 different classrooms. I think one was 7th grade, one was 5th grade.
5th grade girls,
actually, I think, weren't they both boys?
Maybe they were boys.
Yeah, I think it was both boys.
I've gone a couple times, so.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I've only had the one experience. And so I remember, I really hadn't gone. We went to Nashville just to look at different schools, and I was focused more on some of the other schools. So I hadn't really done my research, and we got into the classroom, and the 7th grade boys were first. And what was neat about that was they're in their 3rd year of doing this. So while we're sitting in on their circle work, which they do once a week, they've been doing this for 3 years, and they've been in that same cohort. So these kids are clearly pretty comfortable. And it's a cross-section of society, this diverse by design school. So they have different races, different socioeconomics, right? I mean, it looks like looks like the public school I went to, right? And so they each kid has to check in sort of how they're feeling. That's the only thing that's mandatory. And then they also, when they check in, say if they've brought work, which is that badge work that they're working on. They have to present to the group. And so the first kid to present was a kid that I connected with, right? He was kind of this, gangly, kind of dorky kid, right? And that's me, right? Like
Yep.
that was me in middle school.
Yep.
And he got up and he talked about how he was struggling, and he had realized what he was worried about was that his older sister, who he was really close with, was going to go to college next year.
Mm-hmm.
And when he started talking about that, I started sweating in my palms because I thought, not that I have an older sister and connected on that, but more it was just he's being vulnerable in a group of other seventh grade boys.
Yeah.
Which, that's like violating all the rules that
of seventh grade boyhood.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought, oh dear God, I hope he gets through this without getting heckled or without, something. Yeah. And then at the end of his presentation, with I guess one of the pieces of group work is the kids have to resonate with each
resonance.
other.
That's right.
And so the teacher asked, does anyone want to resonate? And I figure, ain't no way, right? And every hand shoots up to volunteer. Right? I was like, what is
going on here? Yeah.
And then, the teacher chose clearly like the jock in the class, right? Like the kid that, like, there's no way this kind of goofy kid and this jock are going to connect, right?
That's right.
And he walks up and says, I really appreciated you sharing this. I had the same experience last year with my sister. Could we sit together at lunch today? I want to talk with you about this, right? And I'm like, no way. This is staged. There's no way, I mean, and then they dap off or whatever, and then they move on. And we went into another classroom and with fifth graders, and clearly they weren't as versed in the model that is their first year of doing this. But again, we saw kids being vulnerable and connecting, and the part that really then stood out to me, other than just it got a little dusty for me seeing kids being vulnerable. But then we went back into where we sort of originally met, and they said, okay, before we talk about what you saw, we want to tell you why we've developed this model, right? Mm-hmm. And first they started citing all the statistics that we sadly get, recounted when there's a school shooting. Yeah. Students with depression, unhappiness in general for students and for our society. A lot of this, can be linked right back to the rise of cell phones and social media. Yeah. And level of bullying.
Loneliness.
And, yeah. I mean, all the things that, I think it ain't hard you don't have to look hard to see this in our society. And then they said the other piece that people say to us is, well, we can't take that time out of the day because we have to focus on academics. Yeah. So let us show you our academics. Yeah. And they're knocking it out of the park.
Oh, yeah. Top 1%, inverting the achievement gap, et cetera.
And they said, look, even if this takes away from academics, we think that this is about developing the whole child, so we'll take that on. But even more importantly, what we found is that as you develop a whole child, as children develop these relationships and they feel safe, right, they thrive. Yeah. And so and that's reflected in the academics.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so we're excited about the work, and it's going to be challenging. It's anytime you do social emotional learning, it is messy.
Yeah, and if you do it wrong, then you're, the sweaty palms have become realized, right?
Yeah, because if kids are vulnerable and don't feel safe but are being vulnerable, that actually is a recipe for disaster.
Well, I look forward to watching from the sidelines on this, and then it would be great to see how. I mean, as you're successful with it, as you implement it, how can we leverage this for other schools? Because I think, as a society, that's what we've got to do. This is the school that I want my kids in, exactly, and that I think that we all want our kids going to.
And that's ultimately, that's always. I have 3 kids. My oldest one is in 5th grade. That's always my bar. Is what kind of school would I want my son going to? Mm-hmm. What do they focus on? What are their teachers like? What is the culture of the school? And even as I've watched my own 10-year-old grow, like it would be so wonderful if you had a community where he could feel vulnerable and safe and just be himself, so that he can then focus on his academics.
Amen. We're running out of time. I always like to ask, what did I forget to ask you?
Let's see. Those are our big priorities right now. Is growing an elementary school, improving the quality of our social emotional curriculum at our school, and then the work of TLI. I think the only other thing about TLI in particular that I didn't talk about is the challenge of rising into a principalship. And so, in addition to the novice teacher work, TLI is taking on a novice leader cohort this year for the first time, where we're going to have 10 leaders from across the state and provide free professional development in their first year or first couple years as a leader. And so, if there are, for example, someone rising into the principalship that doesn't perhaps have all the skills, as we know most first-year principals don't, we've hired a dedicated coach to provide free coaching to 10 leaders across the state. And so I think that's going to be really exciting work that you can find out more about at tlioklahoma.org.
Yep, let's get all the links out there. So tlioklahoma.org is the teaching and leading initiative. And so for schools that want novice teacher support or teacher leader development, they can go there. If you just want to learn more about Collegiate Hall, that's collegiatehall.org.
That's right.
And then if you want to learn more about the Valor School, just in general, do you remember that one offhand?
I believe it's valorcollegiateacademies.org, but I'm not 100% sure.
Fortunately, I've heard of this thing, the Google.
Yeah, the Google.
Like so, yeah. It's Valor Collegiate Academies, and
Yeah.
they've got a ton of their resources out there on the web as well.
Yeah, and it's called Compass. That will help you find their
right.
social emotional curriculum.
Yes, yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for coming in. This is always fun to have these conversations.
I appreciate the opportunity. We'll see how the Big Ten tournament goes.
Amen.